Welcome to the Richmond Film Network podcast, your all-access pass to the world of independent cinema. Each week, we go beyond the credits and sit down with the creatives who turn vision into reality. Tune in weekly to find out who's on the RFN pod.
Hello and welcome to the Richmond Film Network podcast. I'm Lisa Giles, and with me today is Vivian Owen. Welcome to the podcast, Vivian.
Hi, thanks so much for having me, Lisa.
Vivian, I want to start off at the top by reading your bio so everyone knows a little bit about you. Vivian Owen is an award-winning independent producer, screenwriter, and script supervisor whose past work includes commercials, branded content, short films, and features. Vivian produced the independent horror feature SATURNALIA, which had its world premiere at Raindance Film Festival in London just last month. And she also has a paranormal thriller screenplay titled Occult Detective in development. And Vivian is an adjunct professor in the cinema department at VCU School of the Arts. So, Vivian, where do you find the time, first of all?
Wherever I can. I'm also a mom, so it's pockets of time here and there.
And you're relatively new to Richmond.
I am. Yeah, I moved here in August of 2020, so right in the middle of COVID, which was an interesting time to move because I couldn't really even meet my neighbors at that point.
Well, and in terms of meeting people, it seems like in that short time that you've met everyone in the independent film scene here in Richmond because you've done so much with all of the creative people here. And that in itself is a skill in connecting with people. So my memory is that for you and I, for how we met in the fall of 2023, when you joined the Frenchy Waters production team as a writer and script supervisor for their film, The Drove, which of course swept the Richmond 48-hour horror film project. And then since then, you worked with Frenchy Waters twice more on Booger Sugar and Playground, and then on Corbin Rao's brand spanking new short, Raven's Call. And that's what I know about. So tell me about how, being someone new in Richmond, how you make those connections and do so much in a short period of time. And I know there's more that I haven't even scratched the surface.
Yeah. I think, when I first moved here, like I said, I was in the middle of COVID. And so I really spent the first couple of years just focusing on my screenwriting craft. I have a writing partner, Patrick Alexander, down in Florida, which is where I moved here from. And because of COVID and the strikes and everything else that was happening, just kind of decided for a little while to kind of keep my head down and focus on writing. And we wrote 3 feature-length screenplays in that time. And then once we started to come out of all of that, I felt like, gosh, I still felt brand new to Richmond. I'd been here for 2 years, but I really didn't have a foothold in the local filmmaking community yet. And so having been a professor full-time for 10 years at Ringling College in Sarasota, Florida, I thought, you know what, why don't I reach out to VCU and see if they have any openings, if they have, a need for anybody right now. And that's what I did. I emailed the department head of the cinema department at VCU School of the Arts. And it happened to be perfect timing because they were looking for adjunct faculty to come in and help support the students as they produce their summer films. And so I actually started, probably from the time I emailed them to the time I started was maybe 2 months. And started teaching for them as an adjunct professor, and then found that a lot of the other adjunct professors on staff are members of the filmmaking community in Richmond. And so they introduced me to a lot of people and helped me expand my network. And then, I actually showed up to a networking happy hour that you were holding for the 48-hour horror film competition because I love horror films. And I really just went to network. I didn't expect to join a team. I didn't expect to, to be involved. But there was a point during that happy hour, Lisa, where you said, raise your hand if you're not on a team. And I raised my hand and there was maybe, 10 people that raised their hands. And you asked us to come up to the front and you passed around the mic and you said, you have 48 seconds to pitch yourself. And I was not prepared. I was like, oh my gosh. But I did it, and then it was like whoosh, like after that, every team leader in the room came up to me and wanted me to be on their team. And funny enough, I had met Keely Borland, who was the producer for Frenchy Waters, the night before at a Women in Film networking event. And she and I really hit it off. And so we had talked all night the previous night, and she came up to me and she was, like, you should join our team. And she introduced me to Chris Austin, her partner. And so that just felt like a natural fit because she and I had hit it off, and I joined their team, and just got involved through with the 48, and then met people that way, and then everything just sort of snowballed. I mean, as you know, film is all about your network and your connections, and you get on one thing and then somebody recommends you for something else and recommends you for something else, and it just kind of grew from there. So I do feel like I know a lot of people now in the filmmaking community, both through my connections with VCU Cinema, and then participating in the 48.
So you have just gotten back from a tour of Europe. You've been to the Cannes film market, and then, like I mentioned, your film Saturnalia made its debut at Raindance in London. So tell me about those experiences.
Yeah, so I went to Cannes Film Market. I've never been to a film market before, but I have been in this process of looking for sales and distribution for Saturnalia. And then I also have another feature, Occult Detective, that is in development. So we are looking for investors. And I have, that film is going to be shot in Florida. So I have been talking to all of the film commissioners in Florida, trying to find locations, trying to find incentive money. And one of the gentlemen that I was speaking to down there, he actually created an organization called Film USA, which is a national coalition of film commissioners in the US. And he said, we're going to Cannes next month. It's a great place for producers to go and try to find investors, try to sell their films. You should come with us. You can get a badge through Film USA, and you'll have a home base because Film USA has a booth at the Marché. And so they were like, you would have a home base, you would have those of us in Film USA that you would know and be able to hang out with and network with. And I really think it would be valuable for you to go. And so, I thought about it, and I looked at what it would cost. And then I thought, what, why not? Like, it was probably a month out when I made that decision, and got my badge. And then through getting a registration and a badge to the Marché du Film at Cannes, you get access to a website called Cinando. And Cinando is a database of producers, sales agents, distributors. There are some investors on there, film festivals as well. And so I just started to do my research, like, which sales agents and distributors are working in the world of low budget horror, and started reaching out, and you get contact information through that website. So you get emails and phone numbers. And so I started reaching out to try to arrange meetings while I was there. I was able to secure a couple of meetings, and then flew to Cannes, and had an amazing experience. But I'd love to talk a little bit about markets and the difference between a market and a festival and what that's like. Because there's 4 big markets. So there's Berlin, which happens in February. There's Cannes, which happens in May. There's Toronto, which is September. And then there's the American film market, which is in November. And so film markets can be attached to a film festival, although they aren't always. Cannes obviously is the biggest one and is attached to the Cannes Film Festival. But they are a venue for producers to sell their films. But then also, if you've already got a film represented by a sales agent or a distributor, they're there selling the films that they've already got in their library to the various territories internationally. So at Cannes, what that looked like was, you have the Palais, where you've got Tom Cruise and you've got all the stars, and they're on the red carpet and they're going to their premieres. And then kind of underneath that, in the basement and in the backside of that same building, is the Marché du Film. And every sales agent and distributor has a booth, like a trade show, if you will. And every country also has a booth, because every country wants to try to bring productions to their country, and they've got different incentives that they can offer you to go film there. And so you walk through this basically like an expo where everybody is buying and selling films. And it's a really great place to, meet those sales agents face to face, because prior to that, I had just been sending cold emails, to people to try to get them interested, sending them the trailer, sending them our poster for Saturnalia, and asking if, they wanted to watch a screener. And it's hard road. It's a hard road to go down when nobody knows who you are. And, and we're from Richmond. We're not from LA or New York or any of these big places. So it was great to be able to walk into the market and to say, hey, I've been chatting with Amy via email. Is she here? And they'd go, yeah, she's right over there. And then you just walk up and you introduce yourself and you say, hi, I'm Vivian. I'm the producer of Saturnalia. I've emailed you the trailer. Have you had a chance to check it out? And then you just start to have that face-to-face conversation and build those relationships. And even if that film isn't right for them at that time, you build that relationship as a producer so that when I have my next film, I can go back to her and say, hey, remember me? We met at Cannes in 2025. And, I've got a new horror feature that I'd love for you to check out. And then, it's not a cold email. You have a warm relationship at that point.
So your film, Saturnalia, which you produced, I'll read from your website. The year is 1979, and Miriam Basconi has been shipped off to the prestigious Alströmerius Academy, a preparatory school for America's elite orphan children. Miriam must survive the cruel and sadistic behavior of headmistress Miss Hemlock. From day one, Miriam can tell something is off with her new home. Now she must discover the truth of what's happening to her fellow students behind closed doors. But instead, she uncovers the surreal world living and breathing inside of Alströmerius Academy. So how did you get connected with this project?
So I was on Corbin Raoul's film, A Raven's Call, and I was script supervising on set. And I remember it very vividly because I had my phone out. I must have been taking continuity photos or something. And I get a text from another producer friend of mine, Christina Garnett, here in town. And she said, hey, would you be at all interested in producing a horror feature? And I texted her back right away and I was like, oh my gosh, yes, tell me more. And so she told me that a friend of hers, Max Fisher, who owns Gearhead Camera, which is a camera rental warehouse here in Richmond, was looking to produce a horror feature and needed a producer. And I guess he had reached out to Christina, but Christina was unavailable. She had some other projects going on at the time. And again, I had met her through a Women in Film networking event. And so she passed his name along to me and my name along to him. And we met for coffee right before Thanksgiving and talked about the project. And Max said, I've been frustrated because of what's been going on with COVID and the strikes and not a lot of people having work. And I really want to make something, and I want to make something here in town. I want to make something with my friends. And so I reached out to another friend of mine, Danny Lurch, and, I told him that I wanted to make a giallo film, which are these, amazing films from the 1970s that just have like incredible, like visceral imagery and cinematography. And a lot of them have supernatural or cult elements to them. But mostly they're like murder mysteries. And he was like, I really want to make a giallo film. And Danny wrote the script, and we've got this great location at Dover Hall. And I said, wait a minute, Dover Hall? And he said, yeah. And I said, oh my God, my husband had his company Christmas party at Dover Hall last year. And all I could think of while I was there was this would make an amazing location for a horror film. And so I was pretty much in right away because I knew how incredibly spooky and eerie that location was, and read the script, and then had conversations with Danny Lurch, the writer-director, and his writing team. And, they were just great people. And we all wanted to make something, and we wanted to support the local filmmaking community in Richmond. And so, yeah, I was hired right after Thanksgiving, 2023. And then we were in production January 15th, 2024. So it was very quick, in terms of the turnaround from when, I was hired to when we actually produced the film. So I basically had a month and a half, well, maybe like 2 months of prep, but you have to remember there was holidays in there, right? So it was Christmas and New Year's, and so there was like 2 weeks in the middle where basically you lose everybody because of the holidays, and I was trying to, wrangle wrangle everyone to try to get this film ready. So it was very, very fast. And then we shot 15 days, and we had about 3 days of pickups after that, and then went into post-production, and then the film was fully finished end of 2024.
So I'm not sure where I got this number from. $290,000 budget.
Our production budget was 250. I'd say probably after post it was 300 all in.
So that's, depending who you ask, that's either not a lot or a lot. But for a feature indie period horror, not a lot.
Yeah.
So what strategies or resources, first of all, help you secure that level of funding, and then making the most of that budget with what you had to do?
Yeah. So technically, like, that would be the ultra low budget tier. If we were a SAG production, we were not a SAG production. We were non-SAG, non-union. So of course that helps keep costs down. But then, like I said, we had an incredible location. I mean, Dover Hall is this gorgeous mansion out in Goochland, which looks like it was built in the 1800s, but really it was built in 2000. And it's mostly a wedding and sort of corporate event venue now. There was a family that originally built the house and lived there for about 10 years, but then they sold it. So, the location honestly did about 80% of the work for us, because it has all of this gorgeous architecture and carvings and artwork from the European artwork. There's a lot of antiques. I mean, the family spent years sourcing antiques from Europe and having them shipped over to the US. So a lot of the work was done for us with the location. Not to say that our production designer and our art department were not incredible, because they were, and there were several sets that had to be built that weren't accessible to us through Dover. The dorm rooms were a build that we actually did above Max's garage. The final scene in the film, which I've no spoilers, but kind of takes place in this black void, that was a build that was done at PBS Studios. The opening of the film was shot at the Pump House in Richmond, which is an old decrepit like waterworks facility. So we really tried to maximize our locations as much as possible. And then other than that, it was just putting the money into things that people would see on screen, the costumes, the lighting, the special effects. All of our effects in the film were practical. So we had an amazing special effects artist, and all of the kills, all of the blood, and things that you see, those are all done practically on set. So very little was VFX.
So Claudio Simonetti, who's been scoring films since the 1970s, including Suspiria and Dawn of the Dead, also scored Saturnalia. So how did that partnership come about, and what were some of the challenges or joys of working with such an iconic artist in post-production?
So Danny Lurch, our director, is a huge Claudio Simonetti fan and fan of his band, Goblin. And of course, Claudio scored all of Dario Argento's films, and Dario Argento is a huge, giallo director. And so Danny actually, I think, was just like, we could hire somebody else and sort of tell them to sound like Claudio, or we could just reach out to Claudio and see if he would do it. And so we did. We reached out to him. I believe Danny did it through Instagram, if I'm not mistaken, and asked if he would at all be interested in scoring a film, because Claudio hasn't scored a film in over a decade. And although he's been touring with his band and playing his old soundtracks and things, but he hasn't scored a new film in over a decade. And so they reached out, and Max and Danny had a conversation with Claudio, and they were like, listen, we're a low budget film, but we love you. We love your work. We could hire somebody else to try to sound like you, but we would rather have the secret sauce, And we were like, this is our budget. Are you at all interested? And he said yes. So it just goes to show that, sometimes you just have to ask. Sometimes you just have to reach out and shoot your shot and ask and let the other person say no. I think a lot of times as filmmakers, we build up in our head, oh, this will never happen. This person will never say yes. This actor will never say yes. This composer will never say yes. But let them give you the no, at least have the courage to ask and put it in their court, because you never know what people are going to spark to and be interested in. And so we showed him an early cut of the film, obviously, and he loved it, and he was totally in. And so, he agreed to do it for the small budget that we had to pay him, and we're so grateful.
Were there any other surprise yeses that you got just by asking?
Gosh, that's a good question. Nothing that I can think of off the top of my head. He was the big one. He was the big one. Yeah.
So your writing work, such as The Drove and Occult Detective, shows your ongoing love for horror and the paranormal. What do you think draws you to those types of stories that lives in the margins of reality?
I have always loved scary stories and mysteries and thrillers. I mean, I grew up reading Nancy Drew, and then moved on to R.L. Stine and Christopher Pike, the Fear Street and Goosebumps series, and the Midnight Club. And I, remember watching Dark Shadows with my mother, old vampire show, and reruns. And I don't know, there's something about kind of the puzzle, I think, that I like. I like trying to figure out who's doing this, why are they doing it, what's going on. And then I've also always loved the fact that the horror genre tends to put women first. Horror films are one of the genres where women appear on screen and speak as much or more than their male counterparts. And I love that, most of the time they are the ones with the plan, right? They're not the sidekick to the man or the romantic interest of the man, although sometimes there's romance involved in horror films. But, most of the time the woman is the one that's this is what we're doing. Get it together. Let's go, And I love that strong, heroine who really takes charge. I mean, everyone from Ellen Ripley in Alien to Clarice in Silence of the Lambs to, I could go on and on, but I just love the strong female characters that come out of the horror genre. And as a female filmmaker, I love that. I love watching women be brave, powerful, strong, emotional, and just living in their power,
I had never thought about it that way, and now I will never think about it any other way. So in addition to writing, you're also a script supervisor. And of course, we had you do a presentation for local filmmakers on script supervising, because there were lots of filmmaking teams that were not using them. And obviously they're very much needed. We just had our podcast with Corbin Rao, and he had mentioned that he had never used one before, and now he will, never do another film without one. So for those who don't know exactly what that means to be a script supervisor, give us the quick and dirty. What exactly does a script supervisor do, and why is it so important on a film set?
So script supervisors are the department head of continuity. So it's our job to make sure that even though scenes are going to be shot out of order, and on different story days are going to be all mixed up on the same day, that there is continuity of of a lot of things: continuity of action, continuity of emotion, continuity of props, makeup, wardrobe. And so we track all of that. And the way that I like to talk about it and the way that I like to think about it is as the director's wing woman. And I am there to support the director and make sure that the vision that they want on screen comes to life. And I'm there to worry about all of the little details, like whether or not she should be in the red dress or the blue dress in this scene, or does she have her purse or not in this scene? Does she have the wound on her cheek or not? That's all the things that I worry about, so that the director can focus on performance and getting the performance and the emotional intent that they want out of the actor. We're also the eyes and ears of the editor on set, because the editor is not on set. So we take copious notes on every single take, on the timings of every single take, on what went right in the take, what went wrong in the take, what the director liked, what the DP liked, the shot sizes, all of that stuff, so that when they get all of this footage in the edit, they have our notes to go off of, which tell them the story of the day, because they may not know why take two doesn't work in the director's eyes just by looking at it, but they have our notes that they can reference, and they can start to put, assembly cuts together and then rough cuts from our notes. Also, if anything ever needs to be reshot, if you have to go and do reshoots, pickups, anything like that, you can reference back to the script supervisor notes again to match shot sizes and angles, and just all of the continuity points that need to happen in that scene.
So with all of the talents that you have, producer, script supervisor, writer, do they ever conflict with each other, or do you find that they more support what you do? So for example, say that you're writing, do you find that the script supervisor is creeping in and telling you what's too hard to shoot or what might break continuity? So how do you manage all of that?
Yeah, I do find it very hard to switch between sort of the creative side of my brain and the logical side of my brain. So like if I am trying to write and do any sort of producing or script supervising in the same day, that can be very difficult for me, switching from one part of my brain to the other. If I have to do it, what I try to do is write in the morning, do the creative stuff first, and then let that go, and then switch over to logic brain in the afternoon, whether that's scheduling, budgeting, logistics, phone calls, emails, that kind of thing. But I try when I'm writing to just write, and I don't self-edit very much when I'm just sort of trying to get something on the page. Then there always is a point, where I do go back and say, okay, what is this going to cost? Is this actually achievable on the budget that I'm trying to write for? Or can I actually get this location or find this location? Those things do sort of come in, but I would say they come in more in the editing process. Not in like the initial draft writing process. I try to keep that voice that's like, you can't do that, or that won't work, or that's not in the budget. I try to keep that voice really quiet while I'm writing and just in creative mode and just trying to get all of the scenes onto the page. And then when I go back, I will look at it through a producer's lens and be like, okay, what is this going to cost? What is this going to mean for the schedule? What is this going to mean for the crew and the actors? So yeah, it's it's nice to have both, but like I do have to really be intentional about how I schedule my day so that I can achieve both if I need to in the same day. Ideally, if I could just block out a whole day for writing and being creative and coming up with ideas, that's preferred, or week or whatever. And sometimes I will do that. There will be like blank spots in my calendar where I can just take a week and try to get a revision done or a draft done. But that's less and less frequent the more and more my plate gets filled up with other projects.
So you've been part of small, no budget films like 48-hour film projects and large features. What's something that both scales of filmmaking have in common, and what are some things that are wildly different?
What do they have in common? I would say you're always going to feel like you don't have enough time and you don't have enough money, no matter what your schedule is and what your budget is. And so you always have to work within, the constraints that you have. We all, as creatives, we all wish we had more time, right? And we had more money. And so you just kind of have to work within the limits of what you're given and be as creative as possible. Like I said, if you're working with low budget, you're asking for a lot of favors. You're asking friends and family for locations. You might be asking people to borrow their car or borrow, wardrobe or props or things like that. So it's a lot of, just pulling on your network and figuring out what resources you can pool together. And then I would say the difference is when you do have the money and you can afford some of the luxuries, that makes it a little bit easier. It can provide you a little bit more in terms of resources and materials and supplies, and allows you to, just take care of your crew a little bit more, creature comforts on set, better food, better kind of like access to, maybe a base camp that has air conditioning, things like that you might not have on smaller sets, that you might just have to like deal with the heat and suffer outside. Right. So, I think those are the main differences, I would say.
What advice would you give to Richmond-based filmmakers trying to raise their first six-figure budget? Where do they start?
So fundraising for filmmaking is really tough right now. And if you're looking at six figures or more, you're not crowdfunding. Results from crowdfunding are trending down. It's just really hard right now economically for people to contribute to things that are not necessities. But if you're looking at a six-figure budget, you're going to be having to look for private equity investors. And the easiest way to do that, if you don't have rich friends and family, which some of us are blessed to have those things, some of us are not. But if you do not, then you need to be looking for places where those people live and operate. So filmmakers, we are artists, right? So if you look at your local arts community, if you look at your local theaters, at your art museums, at your, if you have an opera house or a ballet, who's on the board of directors with those companies? Who are the supporters of those organizations? And then reach out to them and say, hey, I'm a local Richmond filmmaker. I see you're on the board of directors at the VMFA. I've got this project. It's going to contribute to the local film community. I would really love to talk to you and see if you know of anybody who might be interested in investing. And they might say, I'm interested, or they might say, if it's not for them, if it's a genre or something that's not for them, they might say, it's not really for me, or it's not the right time for me right now, but I know this person, this person, this person that I could connect you with. Great. Would you be willing to send a personal email and introduce me to that person? The other ways that you can find investors for, a six-figure movie are look at your film and look at what are the issues? What are the potential areas where you could find other organizations that might also care about those issues or might support those issues, right? So if you've got a film with, let's say, veterans, right, you can look to veterans organizations. If you've got a film that's about like women's interests, right, like there are tons of groups that you could reach out to, Planned Parenthood and different organizations that might be interested in whatever the topic is of your film. So really look at the themes. If there's a sport that is plays a big role in the film, whether it's soccer or baseball or and then look at like, okay, what are the community organizations that support that, or what are the local groups, teams that support that, and then start to reach out to the managers of those teams and again, tell them what you're doing and, ask them if they know anybody that would be interested in investing. You're going to get a lot of no's. That's just how it's going to be. You're going to get a lot of no's. You're going to get a lot of pushback. But I always try to never get off the phone or the Zoom without at least getting a referral. So if it seems like that person is not interested, or it's not the right time, or it's not the right project for them, I always ask, hey, do you know of anybody who might be interested in supporting this kind of a film? And then make sure you get that referral. And again, ask for that personal introduction, because it's always going to be better if, like, let's say you, Lisa, introduce me to somebody via email than if I'm just emailing them on my own and saying, hey, Lisa said I should reach out, right? It's always better to have that warm introduction.
If a young filmmaker approached you and said, I want to do what you do, Vivian, what's your advice?
I have these conversations all the time, obviously, because I'm a professor. So I have a lot of students and alumni that are that come to me and ask me for this very advice. And I always say a couple of things. If you're a student that's still in school, it will never be easier to make a movie than it is right now, right? If you are a student in film school, you have access to free equipment that you can check out from your department. You have access to a bunch of interesting locations on campus. If your school has like a dance program or a theater program or a woodworking program, or, like, what are these interesting locations that you have access to on campus that, would be hard for a normal person to get into? Recording studios, right? And then you also have a group of people, a group of peers that are basically on the same schedule as you and are willing to work for free. And so get those people together, check out some equipment, find a cool location on campus, and go shoot something this weekend. There is nothing stopping you if you're in school. And if you're not shooting something for class, you should be shooting something else. Shoot it on your iPhone if you have to, but make as many movies as you can while you're in school, because it will never be easier. And then once you graduate, obviously, you're going to get most of your jobs, your first jobs after you graduate, from your peer network, because somebody else will get hired on something and then they might hear that there's a need and they would recommend you, or your faculty. So stay in touch with your faculty, reach out to your faculty, ask if they know what's going on, if they have any jobs coming up that you might be a good fit for. And, let people know that you're available for work. I think a lot of times people are afraid to say, like, hey, I am up, I am ready, I am free, I am ready to work. Like, let's do this. And I mean, to be honest, like, I even have a hard time doing that too when things get slow, and I'm like, oh gosh, like, nobody's reaching out to me. Nobody's asking me if I'll help them with the project. And then I reach out to my friends and they're like, oh yeah, I thought you were too busy, you know? So you have to let people know when you're available for work. And then, you know, hop on any job that you can, whether it's a 48, whether it's, you know, a short film, a commercial, a music video. There's a lot of stuff that happens in Richmond that is on kind of the smaller scale, but they're always looking for people to help. And then just don't wait, you know, give yourself permission. I was talking to a former student of mine who was like, yeah, I want to be a producer. And what's, you know, what's the best way to become a producer? And I was like, produce your own work, you know, whether it's something you've written or a friend has written, get a group of people together and go make something, you know, like don't wait for somebody to give you permission. If you're young, you don't even have to wait for somebody to give you money, you know, like that's the great thing about being young and in your 20s and just graduated. Like, again, you have this peer group of young, hungry people that want to work, are willing to work for free, willing to trade favors, you know, like I'll AD on yours if you AD on mine or whatever. And you can get together and get a lot of stuff done that way. So yeah, just don't wait. You don't need my permission. You don't need anybody else's permission. Go make films with the resources and the support system and the people that you have. And then that project will lead to the next, and it will just kind of snowball from there.
Of all the professional hats that you wear, what is your favorite?
So I would say that I am a writer at heart. I started writing short stories and poems and things at a very, very young age. Like I want to say like 9 years old. Yeah. 9 years old. I started writing a lot of just little short stories and things like that. And I have notebooks full of things that I am starting to find at my parents' house that I wrote when I was very, very young. So I think writing is my first love. I think it will always be like nearest and dearest to my heart. But of course, it's very isolating, and I am an extrovert. So I can only take writing in solitude for so long. And then I love the energy of being on set, being around people, you know, collaborating and making something come to life. So I love producing and I love script supervising because that gets me on set and it gets me around other filmmakers and it gets me inspired by the things that they're doing and thinking about and the ideas that they have. And yeah, so I guess, I don't know, writing is my love, but like producing is like the magic, I think. And I love that I can do both in this industry, you know, and it's an industry that doesn't necessarily try to pigeonhole you into one thing, and you can do a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and you know, have a lot of different opportunities.
Are there any roles that you have not done that you would love to try?
Yes. So funny you should ask. I want to try directing. I have not directed. I done a lot of producing. And now that I've been script supervising more too, and sitting, you know, right next to the directors and hearing their process and hearing how they talk to actors and, you know, work with actors, I am starting to gain more confidence in that arena. And I really would love to direct something soon. I have a short that I've written that is a single location thriller. It all takes place in a cornfield. I'm from Ohio, so it's like cornfields are my roots, I feel like. But and I would love to direct it, and I would love to try to, you know, make it an all-female crew or as many females as possible. I am all about, you know, kind of supporting female filmmakers because there's still a huge gender inequality in this industry. And so yeah, that's something that is in the works. And I would love and welcome if there are any, you know, female filmmakers in town that don't already know me, please get in touch with me. And you know, because I would love to work with you in the future, either on this project or maybe another project. But I'm always looking for you know, female crew that work behind the camera to collaborate with.
I cannot wait to see that movie. And I didn't know you were from Ohio. I'm from Ohio as well.
Really? Oh, what part?
Columbus.
Okay, I'm from Dayton, but then I went to college in Cincinnati at
Okay.
Xavier. So
Small world.
very small world.
So back to Saturnalia.
Yeah.
Where is it in its trajectory? Where is it going next after Rain Dance?
Yeah. So we had our world premiere at Rain Dance, which was fantastic. That's a great festival. It was one of the only festivals that we submitted to that is not a genre festival. And the reason why we did it, we finished the film late 2024, and then we were like, oh gosh, we want to get into all these horror festivals, but we have to wait basically a whole year because they all take place in October, because of Halloween and spooky season. And so we were like, where would be a good launch pad for the film that maybe happens a little bit earlier, that is very supportive of independent filmmakers, first-time filmmakers, people who are making stuff that's like a little bit weird and offbeat. We said Rain Dance, let's look at Rain Dance. And so we submitted to Rain Dance, and they accepted us. We had a wonderful world premiere there, very, very welcoming community. There were people that came to our premiere because they love giallo films. There were people that were really interested in hearing Claudio's score. We were lucky to be part of their first ever horror weekend. So there were a lot of other horror filmmakers that were in town at the same time as we were. So, we met a lot of them, and, we would go to their screening. They would come to ours. So we had a sold out screening in London, which was fantastic. And so we're now in the process of waiting for all of those other horror genre fests to happen. So there are a few that, take place in September, but most of them are in October. So we're probably going to be waiting a little while before our next acceptance, if you will. But we hope to be playing in a lot of different festivals this fall. And then like I said, we have been working on the sales and distribution side. We've been having a lot of productive conversations. We've been looking at some offers. So there are things in the works. I can't quite comment on them yet, but rest assured, there are things that will be happening on the distribution side for Saturnalia once we wrap up our festival run later this year.
Exciting. So tell our viewers how they can follow Saturnalia, and for the female filmmakers who want to reach out to you and connect with you, how do they find you?
Yeah, so Instagram is probably the best way. Saturnalia is at Saturnalia_film, I believe. And then we also have a website, SATURNALIAfilm.com, that you can go. You can sign up for our newsletter if you want to get information about upcoming screenings and distribution. And then I am at VR Owen on Instagram as well. That's probably the best way to reach out to me at first, is message me there, because I'm on Facebook, but that's mostly for like friends and family. So Instagram is the best way. And I'm looking for, especially like female DPs, female sound mixers, female first ADs, females in camera team, females in G&E. Like, please let me know who you are, where you are. I am building crew lists for a couple of projects as we speak.
Vivian, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Lisa. This is awesome. I love talking to you.
That's a wrap for this episode of the Richmond Film Network podcast. Thanks to our guest and to you, our listeners, for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe, comment, and share. Tune in next week to see who's on the RFN pod. Until then, keep the cameras rolling.